About 2 or 3 years ago, I was heading home from university one night, waiting in a bus shelter for the bus to come. I usually had fairly long waits as my bus only came every 30 minutes, and I passed the time by listening to music on my phone. This particular night, I saw a homeless man digging through a garbage bin nearby. He kept glancing over at me and was acting kind of funny, so I tried to avoid eye contact. Eventually, he came up to me and I saw that he was fairly young, maybe about 30, and had spiderwebs tattooed all over his neck. He then asked me a very strange question. "Where's your daddy?" I was really confused and thought I had misheard him, so I asked, "What?" He repeated his question. "Where's your daddy?" I said that my dad was at home waiting for me, but that wasn't enough for him apparently. He proceeded to grab my arm and said, "Let's go find your daddy." I kind of pushed him off and told him to leave me alone, but he kept insisting that we go find my daddy, almost like I was a lost little kid. I figured the guy was on drugs or mentally ill or something, but he kept talking to me and trying to get me to go with him, sometimes walking away, but always coming back a few minutes later. I considered leaving and walking to the next bus stop, but again, my bus only came every 30 minutes, and I didn't want to miss it by accident. Eventually, the guy simply said, "Maybe you should call your daddy and ask if he's okay." I was really freaked out by this point, but thankfully saw the bus coming down the street. I got on and was worried that he'd follow me, but I saw him walk away once the bus got moving. Even though the guy didn't harm me or anything, he kept talking to and touching me, so it was still a really unnerving experience. Once I got home, I found out that my dad had been laid off from his job, which sent him into a depression for the next few months. Even though it was probably a coincidence, the timing was definitely creepy. I took the same bus for the rest of my time at university, and never saw that guy with the spiderweb tattoos again. A few years ago, I was leaving my grad school office late around 10 p.m. to catch the bus home. I walked from the university campus via relatively busy, well-lit streets to the main north-south road in my area of the city. I was waiting for the bus at a shelter as it was the middle of winter, snowing, and a bit cold. The bus ran about every 15 minutes, so I wasn't worried or nervous, just patiently waiting to get home. I was listening to my music with my headphones in, and when I noticed a guy walk up to the shelter, I looked up at him briefly, did that little Canadian half-smile of acknowledgement, and went back to listening to my music and reading Reddit. A few minutes passed and I could hear him start talking to me. Well, I assumed it was me. I was the only one around. I looked up and he was staring right at me, smiling a bit oddly and speaking to me. I took out my headphones and said, "Excuse me?" He just kept smiling and blathering on, asking me about my day, the weather, and what I like to do. I don't know what it is about me, but I'm a perennial people pleaser. I don't like confrontation, and my main aim in life seems to be to keep the peace. So I answered a few of his questions politely and as non-specifically as I could, with one earbud still in my ear. He just kept blathering on and on. I was sort of just nodding politely. This went on for about 10 minutes, and I just had this sinking feeling in my stomach about this guy, like something was just a little off, but enough to make me nervous. After about 10 minutes, I could see the bus rolling up, which was a huge relief for me. No one else had arrived at the bus stop, and I could see at least 10 to 15 people on the bus, which was great. I got on the bus and sat near the front, and the guy sat across from me so he can keep talking at me. I had originally intended to head to my house, but after this guy decided to be my personal parrot, I decided screw it. I'm going to my boyfriend's instead. I was still getting an uncomfortable feeling from this guy, so I decided I would push the bus stop button at a stop early and see what the guy did. The bus came to a stop at my request, and the guy got up. I didn't move. "Isn't this your stop too?" he asked me, and I said, "Whoop, I must have hit the wrong stop." He looked at me and said, "Oh, that's funny. I mixed up too. This isn't my stop either," and sat back down. At this point, I'm pretty freaked out. I hit the bus stop for the next stop and texted my boyfriend to come and meet me at 109th Street. I got up to leave the bus once it stopped, and the creepy dude followed. I crossed the road and he followed, still talking away at me, still asking me questions. Once I got to the other side of the road, I told him that I had to go and that my boyfriend was meeting me. He looked irritated at the idea of my boyfriend and tried to walk with me a bit more, but I stopped and told him that I was walking on alone. Can I have your number? I panicked. I just froze. I decided to give him almost my phone number. Just the last 4 digits scrambled. I read it off to him, said goodnight, and started walking away quickly. I had made it maybe 20 steps away and I could hear someone jogging after me. "Hey!" he yelled after me. I think there was a mix-up. I tried calling the number and it wasn't you." He jogged up and leveled next to me and was still smiling that same fucking smile, staring at me. How weird," I said, grabbing my phone. I pretended to check for a missed call and quickly texted my boyfriend that I was terrified and that he needed to get here. Now. "So, what's your real number, then?" he asked. I honestly don't know what I would have done. I think I would have given him my real number. I just had no idea what to do. It was cold, it was winter, it was dark in this little residential neighborhood I had entered, and I knew I couldn't outrun him. Luckily for me, that was when my boyfriend came running up. He's 6'3" and somewhat imposing, and I turned to the guy and said, "Have a good night," and jogged up to my boyfriend and just launched myself at him. I didn't look back at the creepy dude, but I did tell my boyfriend to please make sure the doors were all locked and the windows all closed before we went to bed that night. This happened today. If you need a visual, I'm female, in my late 20s, but look young for my age. 5 foot, admittedly on the plumper side, of mixed race, and was in work-appropriate shorts and a shirt. For a number of reasons, I take the bus to and from work, and today was no exception. Thanks to the pandemic, the ones I use run every hour, so I've changed from taking 2 buses to just 1, and walking the rest of the way. It started off fine, but thanks to progressively worse situations culminating into what happened today, I'm rethinking my commute. The first time I saw him was this morning on my way to work. I had just gotten off the bus and was walking towards the crosswalk, passing small stores and parking areas as usual. For context, I have clinical anxiety, and to keep myself calm when I'm traveling to and from work, I have earbuds in playing music, so I don't hear the specifics of what he's saying. At first I ignored the shouting, figuring someone was just upset the shops were still closed, but it kept going as I got closer, so I turned off my music in case something was off. Spoilers. It was. The shouting came from a man, young enough to not have noticeable gray in his long, dark brown hair and beard, most likely homeless and not wearing a mask. If he was dirty or greasy with holes or stains in his clothes, I couldn't tell you, because I was focused on getting to work with time to spare. When I turned my music off, I realized he was shouting at me, calling me a bitch as I passed him, telling me to keep going like I just insulted his mother. I've been told not to engage with someone who seems mentally unstable, so, not wanting to aggravate him more, I stayed quiet. He kept shouting as I got further away, even as I was on the other side of the street, with me keeping my music off just in case he decided to follow me, not even looking back until I couldn't hear him anymore. I would have chalked it up to a weird encounter, had it been a one-time thing. But things got worse when work was over, and I was heading towards the bus stop that would take me home. Again, earbuds were in, music playing, only this time my legs were bordering on tormenting me for being on my feet for hours. As I got closer to the stop, I noticed someone was there as well. I brushed it off, hoping it wasn't another pothead talking to himself or a guy who didn't know about being in the middle of a pandemic. No, it was worse. The shouting guy from this morning. And still shouting. Even without my anxiety, I was scared. I didn't have a lot of options, and I'll admit the one I picked wasn't the best one. I turned off my music once again and kept walking to the bus stop, figuring he would let me pass like last time. Another no. In the hours that passed, he had claimed the bus stop and didn't want anyone else there. I was a foot away from the stop bench when he got close, shouting how I was a bitch and a cunt, and that this was his bus stop, pointing behind me to turn around and go back. I didn't think he would get close enough to feel his spittle hit my face, threatening to break my sunglasses as he stood in front of me, moving left and right when I did to avoid him. While this was going on, a woman and her wheelchair-bound son, someone I've seen around, was coming out of the McDonald's besides the stop. The son was noticeably special needs and was moaning at the man's loud shouting. He then directed his insults at the son, which made him moan louder. On one hand, I wanted to kick him below the belt and stand my ground as he cried on the sidewalk. On the other hand, I'm much too passive, shocked, and desperate to avoid conflict of any kind. So I took several steps away from the man, keeping quiet and trying to think of what to do. Enter the hero of this tale, the guy with a dog and who I assume was his daughter. I remember him asking me if the man was keeping me from the bus. I didn't say anything. Not sure why, but it could have been a protective measure. I might have nodded, but I'm not sure. The guy confronted the shouting man, who had no intention of leaving. Then the guy passes the dog's leash to the girl, before shoving the man in the chest. The fight, or whatever it was, lasted for a few seconds, before the shouting man turned around and walked away. The situation ending with the trio walking away. The woman and son leaving, me sitting down until the bus arrives 2 minutes later, and then the shouting man far from all of us. I'm safe at home now, the shock worn off as well as the heart-racing panic from the situation. Needless to say, I never want to meet that shouting man again. But to the man who drove him away, thank you so much. It happened roughly 4 years ago when I was in college and before I owned a car. It was after dark and I was waiting for my bus to get back to campus at a deserted bus stop across from a closed church, which had burned down not too long before then. Typically, when I would wait for the bus, I'd keep my earbuds in and rarely had to interact with anyone. At some point, a man approached the bus stop from that direction of the church and started talking to me. Since I had the earbuds in, I had to take them out and asked him to repeat what he wanted. He asked me if I could help him out with a few bucks because he was from the other side of town and needed some cash to get back. He didn't smell of alcohol, at least not that I could detect it, and didn't look like a homeless person. I often don't carry cash in my wallet, but that night I may have had some $5 to $10 in there, although normally I may have given someone like him a couple bucks. There was something off that I felt about him. He was wearing all black clothes with a hat on his head and periodically would put his hands inside the pockets of his jacket. I'm a generally cautious person and tend to be less than trusting of strangers, and when you add the fact that we were alone at that bus stop after dark, I had a feeling that taking out my wallet would be a bad idea, even though I really had very little cash in there. So I apologized to him and said that I didn't have any cash on me, and that I couldn't help him. I put the earbuds back in and casually took a few steps away, hoping to indicate that the conversation was over. But he continued speaking, so I had to take one earbud out. Now he was doing the "come on, help a brother out" routine, and all I could do was to continue telling him that I really had no cash on me, otherwise I definitely would have helped him. This went on for a few minutes. Now, despite me being a 6-foot dude and having maybe a few inches over the man, I'm not a people person, and any interaction of this sort can be anxiety-inducing, and the way he just wouldn't give up was starting to really worry me. What happened next, I'm still not completely sure if it was real or just my adrenaline-filled brain fooling my eyes. But for a second, I thought I saw him pull out a small blade from his left jacket pocket and quickly put it into the right one. He didn't threaten me, he didn't explicitly tell me he had a weapon or that I had to give him stuff. As far as I saw it, it was a sly way of showing me he was armed to inspire me to be more generous. At this point, I was in a fight or flight mode and was discreetly clutching my own foldable knife in my jacket pocket, because I knew I might have to defend myself if he got tired of playing nice. On the outside, though, the conversation still followed the same back and forth, with him asking to help him out, and me repeating that I couldn't help him. Since at that point he hadn't threatened me yet, I decided that my best shot to avoid confrontation was to walk away myself. So I told him the bus was taking too long, and just started walking towards the next closest stop, hoping the bus wouldn't pass when I was between them. As I was walking, I glanced back and saw the guy was following me at a distance, still calling out to me on why I didn't want to help him. Lucky for me, after I reached the bus stop, not a minute passed, and just as the guy was approaching me again, my bus came, and I hopped in, glad to be around other people again. The guy didn't follow and simply stayed behind at that bus stop, probably waiting for the next person he could bother. It took me the ride home to process what happened and what could have happened that night. And when I got off the bus next to my apartment building, I decided to call 911 just to notify them to be on the lookout in that area.